unlike Fianna Fáil, I want to say from the outset that we will not be supporting this motion, and Sinn Féin will oppose this motion and will vote against it. We heard from the Minister in relation to the sofas, and basically, as we know, what they do is they grant immunities to soldiers in the face of prosecution, and they give them protections from local courts and local justice systems in order that they be returned to their home countries and face prosecution in some cases, and that's fair enough in relation to what they do. But they've also been controversially used by other militaries over recent years, and it's worth noting that at this juncture of the debate. For example, particularly in the US and British soldiers who committed crimes in Iraq. We already have SOFAs in place with the UN for Irish soldiers operating under UN-mandated missions. And that is the key point from our point, that this is already there and the Irish soldiers are already protected under UN missions. For other missions, an exchange of letters take place to deal with the legal issue. So the question we need to ask ourselves as a Parliament and as a people here is, why is this government bringing forward two SOFAs to deal with EU and NATO now? Why at this time? Is it a tidying up of some side issues to prepare us for more intense or greater links with the EU army that has been proposed by many of your partners in Europe? In the committee, and again today, we heard when this motion was discussed in committee, that the Minister clearly said that the department were told that the Defence Forces would not be able to participate in the German battle group in 2020 if we didn't have the SOFA in place. So there it is. This is a vote on our participation in an EU battle group, and that is what the Minister of State has said in committee and again repeated here today. That and our participation in NATO's so-called Partnership for Peace. And Partnership for Peace, Yaskin Corley, is basically a stepping stone to full NATO membership. And for us to have any link at all with NATO is contrary to our neutrality, no matter what way deputies in this House will try to dress that issue up. So therefore, Sinn Féin is emphatically opposing this motion. It is a disgrace in our view to see Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael continuing to work together to undermine Irish neutrality and lay the groundwork for an EU army. Every step that has been taken regarding defence issues in the EU since has moved us further along the path of the creation of an EU army. This was seen in the Lisbon Treaty and the creation of EU battle groups. And Sinn Féin rightly told the Irish people that the Lisbon Treaty would be a betrayal of Irish neutrality and lay the foundations for the creation of an EU army. And we were proven right. And Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael continue to lie to the true extent what is really behind this to the Irish people. They know how popular neutrality is in this country, and that is why they have on 3 occasions in the last 13 years refused to support Sinn Féin's legislation to hold a referendum on enshrining neutrality in Bunreacht na hÉireann. If you really believe in Irish neutrality, if you have no problem with Irish neutrality, then you should have backed our motion not once, not twice, but 3 times and made sure that it was locked in tight to our constitution and that it was enshrined in Bunreacht na hÉireann. But no, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil time and time again have voted against it, because we know the direction that these two parties, along with their sister parties in Europe, are trying to take the European project down. These parties know that the Irish people would support inserting neutrality into our constitution, and neutrality is something that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael want to do away with. That is the long and the short of it. This explains why they have been slowly eroding and chipping away at it since the 1990s. But in my view, they can't hide and pull the wool over people's eyes anymore. An EU army is coming if the European masters get their way. And don't take my word for it. Don't take the word of Sinn Féin. Let's look at what some of those so-called European masters are saying themselves. Let's put on the record of this House what they are declaring to the European citizens and to the world. Take the words of Jean-Claude Juncker, who said creating an army is one of the main goals of the European Union. Or take the words of German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President Emmanuel Macron, who recently signed the Treaty of Aachen. They both explain how importantly the treaty was for their military cooperation and how it contributes to the creation of an EU army. Or even listen to your own colleague minister, the MEP for Dublin, who produced a paper calling for a complete disbanding of Irish neutrality and full integration into the EU military apparatus and NATO itself. It is in black and white in a position policy paper published by that same MEP. Or let's listen to what has been said in Madrid when we look at the ALDE group, the Fianna Fáil's group, which adopted a European election manifesto which states, "We welcome greater European cooperation in defence spending, an agreement of PESCO, and encourage Member States to further increase defence cooperation in areas of mutual advantage, and greater cooperation with and to complement NATO, which remains the backbone of military cooperation and the guarantor of collective defence for Europe." Well, not on our watch. And let's listen to what the leader of that group, Fianna Fáil's sister party, said when he openly called for an EU army and the European Defence Union. As he put it, Europe is only spending between 40 and 45% of US military spending, and 3 times more than Russia. And to booming applause from the Liberal audience, and I'm sure Fianna Fáil were at the conference, he quoted Macron saying, "28 armies is a waste. We need 1 army. That is our project." That is what the Fianna Fáil EU's leader said at the ALDE conference. So let's be clear about where this project is, where they are trying to take the European project in relation to defence. So for the lack of sofas on the level that the government now want us to operate has not in the main hampered Irish Defence Forces from doing incredible work on UN-mandated peacekeeping missions. That has happened, and it will continue to happen with or without these sofas here before us today. So what we really have before us is a change in how we deploy our defence forces overseas. We don't have to pass these 2 sofas today, or indeed at any stage, when we already have quite an effective operating sofa which deals with what is laudable and what is acceptable to the Irish people, that is participation in UN missions abroad, and that is where it should start and that is where it should end. The motion we have before us is making it easier for different countries to amalgamate their militaries and to have joint operations. That is what this is about. It is about dragging Irish soldiers in the EU and NATO military apparatus and sending them off on missions. What should be before us is a motion extracting ourselves from these military organisations that compromise our neutrality. What should be before us is a bill that Sinn Féin put forward, which is to enshrine neutrality in our constitution. That would be the right thing to do and what the vast majority of Irish people want. Instead, what we have is a very similar situation to that of PESCO, where there was very little understanding or public debate on this huge change to our neutrality, and then all of a sudden it's foisted upon us out of the blue. This is the common tactic of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil in their attempts to undermine our neutrality and that gradual, bit-by-bit erosion, piece by piece, along with their sister parties in Europe. We have not heard a demand from anyone in the defence forces here looking for these 2 sofas. There are sufficient protections, Minister, when it comes to this issue on UN missions where the sofas already exist. Instead, this is joining us to an EU continued militarisation project, and the Irish people have repeatedly taken stands in this country and demanded that we respect neutrality, and that is what this Parliament should be doing, and that is why Sinn Féin will be calling a vote on this issue. The motion before us is totally contrary to the issue or the idea of Irish neutrality. Sinn Féin rejects it and will continue to reject all attempts to erode Irish neutrality and to immerse Ireland in EU military apparatus and the EU militarisation project, which is gaining momentum across Europe. And for that matter, we will oppose any attempt to bring us closer or to bring us into any NATO project associated with that. Gurmaigat.